alongside Gavin, Tony. Gavin, again, I mean, feels like just yesterday we were here doing this, which we were. It's great to be back on, get some consistency going with the show, and it's just an honor to be able to be back on with you.
I'm just happy the love and support everybody gave us on the first one, and we hope we can keep going, keep pushing.
Absolutely. And so for those who maybe weren't here yesterday or didn't hear, we do have two different links in the description on our YouTube if you're watching through there. The first one is our Teespring. You can go on and purchase your favorite sweatshirts and different types of apparel with our logo on it. You can see that in the top right corner of the video. We also have a Patreon if you'd like to support us there. If you can't, it's not a problem. Please feel free to share it with your friends. At the end of the month, you, the viewers, are going to vote on what organization and foundation we're going to donate to. We donate 10% of our total profits at the end of each month. Again, like I mentioned yesterday, Gavin, you definitely agree on this. In times like this, we want to ensure that we're having unity, and especially with things like sports, we want to unite. And that's really the mission and the goal. And I'm going to do my best every day to remind our viewers of that and just make sure that we as a society understand that. So anything else you wanted to mention on that note before we begin, Gavin?
I mean, hey, look, sports is a great unity, unites everybody. And right now at the time, we don't really have sports. So we hope this could be a place where we all sit down, come together, talk sports, and just have fun. And yeah, let's just have fun with it. Let's get going. Let's get ready.
Absolutely. And definitely as important as that, just making sure that we all are having those tough conversations that need to be had sometimes. We consider this a good space to be able to do all that. Without further ado, let's get started with it. The first topic we're talking about today, Dalvin Cook, the Minnesota Vikings running back, has been there for quite some years, had a really big breakout season last year after coming off an injury a few years ago. It became his backfield once Latavius Murray left. Dalvin Cook has now officially announced today that he will be holding out from any other Minnesota Vikings team activities. Obviously, right now, they're all virtual. So, Gavin, I'll ask you first before I give my opinion. What are some of your thoughts on Dalvin Cook holding out until he gets an extension? He does have 1 year left on his contract, but he wants a considerably fair extension, as he quotes. So, Gavin, what are some thoughts?
Well, hey, I feel like he deserves it. Dalvin Cook, even though in 2017, his rookie season, he only played 4 games before he got hurt. And looking at his stats, four games played, 74 attempts, 354 yards in 4 games. And then after that, he played 11 games the next year, and then he played 14 at his breakout season. And at one point, Dalvin Cook was leading the league in rushing yards until Derrick Henry overcame and just became the monster we all know. And I really do believe that in this holdout, Dalvin Cook has leverage. And his argument would be like, well, hey, you paid Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins only took us to the playoff once or twice. They were supposed to go last year, ended up not making it. Eagles ended up taking the spots, thank you to the Chicago Bears. And Dalvin Cook is a great runner. He's one of those runners that can kind of do it all. He also does it in the passing game as well. But when you look at the leverage and the statistics he has in 3 years, he makes a great point. And I want to say this: his leverage on this, people may say, "Oh, it's stupid. Like, you don't really have leverage." He has more than what Melvin Gordon had, like more leverage than Melvin Gordon had, because they don't have another running back in the backfield, where the Chargers had Austin Eckler in the backfield. So you got to look at it and kind of put Minnesota in like I don't want to say a tough spot, but they're realizing there's going to be a problem there. They don't get to take care of soon.
Definitely. And so, like you mentioned, they signed Kirk Cousins a few years ago. They didn't make the playoffs the year before this season. Then they made it this year. They were able to beat the Saints, and then they went on to lose to the San Francisco 49ers, who would go on to pretty much be a near Super Bowl champion, but they did lose to the Chiefs. So it really isn't a lot of shame to lose to that team and have that much talent. But like you mentioned, I mean, even Kirk Cousins got an extension this season. Here's my thoughts on it. In my opinion, running backs should not be getting paid as much as some of them do. I think it was stupid to pay Todd Gurley. I think it was stupid to pull the trigger and sign Ezekiel Elliott. Here's why. Especially on teams where you have a good offensive line, they're who's really important when it comes to the running game. It's 2020. You don't have running backs used the way that they were back in the 1980s. Nowadays, it's a passing game. You take a look at Cliff Kingsbury with the air attack. You take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs, who are having their quarterback dropping back and throwing 40-plus times a game. The quarterback is who should be paid the most, and his offensive line to protect him. But just as important, the running back is a role player, not the centerpiece, with the exception of maybe Derrick Henry in Tennessee. But take a look at the Dallas Cowboys and the mistakes that they made this year. They decided to sign Ezekiel Elliott after he held out. First of all, you have another replaceable running back in Tony Pollard in that backfield behind an amazing O-line.
Yeah.
Invest your money in the O-line. Invest your money in talent like Amari Cooper and Dak Prescott, which they still haven't paid Dak. But they gave it to Ezekiel Elliott, and that's now going to hurt their cap, and that's why they probably haven't given Dak some of the money that he's asking for. And guess what? On the play that mattered the most this season, Ezekiel Elliott tapped himself out. His backup, Tony Pollard, went in and fumbled. That's just one example. Let's talk about the Los Angeles Rams. Todd Gurley, who him and the system of Jared Goff and the genius coach of Sean McVay were able to get to the Super Bowl last year. What happened when Todd Gurley got hurt? They weren't able to really play well. And this year, he had arthritis in his knees. He struggled all year. They didn't trust him. And now they cut him, and they're eating a lot of dead cap. I think it's stupid to extend a running back to that extent, especially when they're so replaceable. Invest in your offensive line. Invest in your defensive front. Invest in a bunch of these different guys. Running backs should not be paid the money that they are. And they do have another running back in that backfield who had an 100-yard game in Week 17. I don't recall his name right now, but he certainly is a replaceable guy. What was that?
Is it Amir? Are you talking about the Rams?
Madison. It's Madison. I forget his first name.
Yeah.
But Madison, he was pretty good. And maybe at some point you should say maybe it's not the running back himself, because they've had guys like Latavius Murray who went out there and were able to repeat some of the same production that Dalvin Cook had. Maybe you should give credit to your offensive line. Maybe you should give credit to some of these other guys. Now, on the plus side, you're not going to pay Stephon Diggs now. You don't have to pay Justin Jefferson. You don't have to pay some of these additional guys you thought you would have earlier. But at the same time, do not make the same mistake that Dallas made, and they're going to regret it. And most importantly, what the Rams did, which are now have a lot of dead cap. Do not make the same mistakes as these teams. I don't think Dalvin Cook or any running back for that matter, with maybe the exception of Christian McCaffrey, who's more of a pass catcher, and Derrick Henry, who literally carried that team last year, to get paid.
Well, I don't understand. I don't really agree with the whole Todd Gurley thing, because I don't think without Todd Gurley, that Super Bowl run that Jared Goff had, doesn't happen. Todd Gurley was ruined. Ruined because he ran the ball like almost 25 times a game just to hide Jared Goff's weaknesses. And we saw Jared Goff's weaknesses last year on display. And we're going to see it a lot this year. Jared Goff, to me, is, I don't want to say average or below average quarterback. I don't see Jared Goff he might make the plus because of the defense they have, but when the times mattered most, Jared Goff, the ball wasn't in his hands. I mean, look, the reason why they went to the Super Bowl, pass interference. I don't know how they missed that, but it was a pass interference. It wasn't Jared Goff. C.J. Anderson ran them into the playoffs because poor Todd Gurley, his knees were weak. And I don't know about paying running backs. They do take the most hit. I can see your point there, but you're right. The offensive line is the MVP. But I do believe this, and I believe this really well. Without offensive line, you can have all the offensive lines in the world. You can have the great blocking in the world. But if you had the crappiest running back, what does the work do? Ezekiel Elliott, do I agree he needed the money right there? No. Dak, I don't think Dak is worth $40 million, but I do believe he does deserve money. Dak proved himself sometimes in recent games. The record may have not showed it, but he did prove himself. But when it comes to like the running back and paying running backs, this is the generation, or this is the times where running backs are being paid now. Le'Veon Bell, his holdout, which I kind of feel was a fail. Le'Veon Bell, he went to the New York Jets. I wish he went somewhere else and he got less money than what Todd Gurley and Ezekiel Elliott made. We're just at that point where running backs are getting paid faster than quarterbacks, and receivers are getting money too as well. When it comes to the Cowboys situation, you mess yourself up because now you can't pay everybody that you need to. You're running short. Dak can't get his money. Amari Cooper got his. Ezekiel Elliott got his. But there's also players on the defense that are going to need theirs pretty soon. So we're going to have to see how that unfolds, really, and see how Zeke plays. Right now, he didn't look like he deserved that money at the moment.
Definitely. At one point, I do have to say as well, you did mention even if you don't have a great running back behind a good O-line, they're probably not going to be as productive. But again, it's 2020. You throw the ball a lot more. But more importantly, running backs are very easy to find. You can pick up a running back that can give you an 1,000-yard season the same way the Houston Texans did with Carlos Hyde this past season. It's not a hard thing to do. If you're a team like with Derrick Henry, where he literally does have to carry that team, maybe it is worth him giving the money. And they actually didn't. They actually gave Ryan Tannehill money and gave him the franchise tag. It's still unclear if he's going to fully commit to that and take another season understanding what it's like with running backs. I think the team's got a little excited the past few years paying their running backs, But I think now that you have a situation like Todd Gurley, and we don't know what's going to happen with Zeke, maybe his production might not go down, but they might not be able to pay some of their key players next few years. They lost Byron Jones. They might lose Van Der Esch in a few years if they can't afford to pay him whatever linebackers are asking for coming a year or two down the road. So I think there's a possibility. We're going to wrap up this part and get to the next one. But in conclusion, and Gavin, I definitely want to hear some of your final thoughts on this. I believe Dalvin Cook does not deserve top running back money. He does deserve to get an extension, but not anywhere near what some of the other running backs have had. And I also think that the other running backs didn't deserve that money either.
He's not worth Ezekiel Elliott $90 million money, but I'm giving around like the Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley type range type. I do believe he deserves some money. He proved himself after an ACL injury, which is kind of hard because you don't come back the same. So let's see how that goes.
All right, we definitely will. We'll touch base on that as that continues to progress. Otherwise, we're going to get on to our next topic. We know that's a little delayed, but since the show is new, we definitely want to break this down and get some more general thoughts on this. We are going to be talking about DeAndre Hopkins and his role in a trade and being a Cardinal now. And so pretty much this was a surprising move. So, Gavin, let's get some of your thoughts first. DeAndre Hopkins is a Cardinal. We have Kyler Murray throwing him this year. He went through so much with Bill O'Brien, went through so much as a Texan for many years, and now he's a Cardinal.
Well, if I'm Deshaun Watson, I feel upset, I feel hurt, and I feel beaten, and I feel tortured. I have Will Fuller, Kiki Cutie, I hope I said that right, and Kenny Stills to throw to versus that and not have that man. First of all, congratulations, Kyler Murray. You got yourself a dog of a wide receiver who's going to go out and catch everything he can. And you still got Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk. And they're going to and Kenyon Drake in the backfield. They're going to be a problem down the road. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year. But look, if you look at what they gave up DeAndre Hopkins for, which is David Johnson, an injured David Johnson, and a second-round pick, and there's a little more things. So that was like the headline. I kind of feel like if I'm DeAndre Hopkins, I'll feel a little disrespected. Because one, you look at it, you're like, okay, well, I'm, like, hey, you really got rid of me because of a few things. But I felt like if DeAndre Hopkins stays in Houston, I feel like they would be better. I mean, look, they lost a really big lead to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yep.
And I forgot, and Randall Cobb too. But they also lost a lead to the Houston Texans. But that's not really DeAndre Hopkins' fault or Deshaun Watson. That's maybe bad coaching and, Patrick Mahomes is a freaking nature. I just think it was a wrong decision to trade away your best wide receiver, arguably sometimes the best wide receiver in football, second best, maybe top 5. That's another debate for another day. But the Arizona offense got better.
Definitely. No, there's some good points there. So let's talk about the trade as a whole. Like you'd mentioned, the Cardinals are going to benefit substantially from this. In my opinion, Hopkins is number 2 behind Julio Jones, maybe Michael Thomas at 3. But pretty much let's talk about what that ended up being. Which team is better off after all is done? Not necessarily what the trade was, but some of the moves afterwards. Because you have the Houston Texans who went out and got Brandon Cooks as well. That's one thing that was forgot to be mentioned. Brandon Cooks, who is also more of a deep threat, which they were missing last year when Fuller would get hurt. And you have Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, Will Fuller, a few other guys there. You have Darren Fells. Do you think that they still have a good wide receiving core? And most importantly, can they still be ahead of both now the more competitive Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans in their own division?
Well, I still think Deshaun Watson's Deshaun Watson. He's going to find a way to do what he does. They're going to win games. They're not going to win like 12 games. They might win around like 11 to 10, the 9 range. But like I said, you lose a really big piece in DeAndre Hopkins. Like there's no replacing that. Like you're not going to find no DeAndre Hopkins right away. It takes time. Let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins has been there for a long time. He's been there for Ryan Fitzpatrick, Matt Schaub, and I think there's one more. I'm not too sure.
Was it Brock Osweiler that was there at some point?
Yeah, Brock Osweiler.
They had a bunch of guys before.
Those are 3 garbage quarterbacks. Well, except for Ryan Fitzpatrick here and there. But those are 3. Well, 2 are garbage and 1 is sometimes. And he finally got a great quarterback to throw him the ball. And then you just get rid of him. And you got to look at it. Well, now you got to look at the Houston Texans offense. The big problem last year wasn't wide receivers for them. It was the offensive line. Deshaun Watson was getting killed waiting for DeAndre Hopkins sometimes, waiting for Will Fuller. So now that you take DeAndre Hopkins away, the first option, and now he has to stand there for even longer to find the other 3 to 4 options with a decent tight end or a solid tight end, whatever you want to call him. I just think, hey, the Houston offense just got a downgrade, a huge downgrade. If I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm like, yo, this sucks. I don't want to come back. Maybe I need something better than this. Like you just took away everything I had basically. David Johnson, can you prove that he might work? He might work. Carlos Hyde did it. Lamar Miller did it before he went down. But I think the problem is now is David Johnson's banged up. He hasn't played a full season in a couple years now. So we gotta see how this goes. If I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm really not happy about this move.
All right, and so one final part to wrap it up. After his contract expires, still on his rookie deal, are you exploring other options, or are you taking a nice big pay raise with the Houston Texans?
Well, the Houston Texans are going to throw all the money they have at him, which they should. But if I'm Deshaun Watson, I gotta see how this year goes. If he can make something out of nothing with all these wide receivers, I'll be like, maybe I'll buy in, but I'm gonna need an offensive line first. But if they don't, if this year goes bad, and I'm talking like they go 8-8 or miss playoffs, and they lead the league in draws, I'm like, yeah, this is not it. This is it. Maybe you look elsewhere. I wouldn't automatically rule out, signing back because money is money at the end of the day, but I would look elsewhere if this year is really bad.
Definitely. All right. Well, that wraps up that topic. We do have our next one coming up. I know we are the More Than Philly show. We always do like to bring up when we were talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. And so we're going to be talking about Darius Slay. So we're going to be pretty much covering 2 topics here, the drama in Detroit as well as the Eagles getting their next corner. So I'm going to bring Gavin back in just a second. We're going to be talking about the newly acquired Eagle, Darius Slay. We know the Eagles had their secondary issues last season. And so we're going to bring in Gavin once again. Let's get some thoughts on your end. I'm going to give mine first here. I think it's a great pickup. I think it was a great trade for this team. It's obvious they needed a corner. They wanted Byron Jones. They missed out on him. They wanted Jalen Ramsey. They missed out on him. In my opinion, this is the best move this team could have made. Gavin, I think you can agree with me on this when I say we were infuriated when the Eagles decided not to get Jalen Ramsey. But look at what the Rams gave up. 2 first-round picks, as well as in addition to that, they have to give him a pretty hefty contract this coming year. He said he wasn't going to hold out, at least for now, but who knows what's going to happen with Jalen Ramsey. His production kind of went down, actually, when he went there. He's still a top 5 corner in the league. Yeah. I don't think that's a question. But we got Darius Slay. The Philadelphia Eagles got Darius Slay, who has a pretty well-known history of shutting down Amari Cooper. So I'm going to ask you this, Gavin. What are some of your first thoughts on this? And then the second part of the question, who's going to take over the other corner position now that Jalen Mills is playing safety?
So first off, I want to say I'm happy about this trade. We needed it. This secondary was and has always been one of the worst parts of the Eagles defense, even past years. So you get a guy that wasn't really too expensive. You didn't really get a hefty asking price for him either, and you get a guy that wants to win. He said when he left Detroit there was no winning spirit, no winning culture there, and I believe it. And you bring him around guys who just won a Super Bowl a couple years ago, and you bring them around, you put them together, and then you think about it, you add them in with a young secondary now because we were getting old in the secondary, and hopefully he just does what he came in to do, take the number 1 option away, like Amari Cooper, and I think we go against other teams that have like OBJ this year. So this is going to be a good pickup all around, and we need it. And to answer your second question, I think it's going to be between Avonte Maddox. We got Nicole Roby-Coleman, the pass interference god. So maybe we'll get away with a couple of them this year. And we also got Sidney Jones. I don't really like Sidney Jones that much. I believe in Trayvon LeBlanc more and Avonte Maddox before Sidney Jones because Sidney Jones has nothing to prove. He always, give or take, the guy was always injured, right? Always with hamstrings and something else. ACL, I think when he first came out. But Sidney Jones, to me, when he was out there, just wasn't that guy. I think Jalen Mills on safety with Roddy McLeod and the new safety we got, Will Parks, and then the guy that we drafted as well coming in. I think this is going to be a great year for the secondary. I think that the secondary this year is going to be much better. I'm not going to say we're going to be locked down, but we're going to not giving up big play after big play after big play like it felt like last year.
Now, what about Rasul Douglas? He's still here. He's done some good things, obviously, last year. If anyone remembers the Vikings game, the way I do it was a lot of either blown coverage or Rasul Douglas got burnt by Stephon Diggs a few times. But Douglas has shown a lot of upside. I'll get to who I think in a minute. But what are your thoughts on Rasul Douglas? There were rumors he was going to be traded to San Francisco in a straight-up trade for Dante Pettis. That never happened. We ended up swapping 6-round picks and getting Marquise Goodwin. We'll cover the wide receivers in a little bit here. But before we get to that, what do you think about Rasul Douglas?
Well, Rasul Douglas, I like him. He's not the quickest, you know. He's not, but he's physical. He's physical, and sometimes we need that in a corner. I watched a lot of the games last year, and some of his pass interference calls were kind of 50-50 each way. But we need a physical corner, someone that can go against like the taller aspects of the wide receivers or some tight ends. So I like Rasul Douglas. I don't like him on an every down situation, just when we need him here or there, like in red zone opportunities, like physicality and others. But Rasul Douglas, I'm glad they didn't get rid of him. And sometimes he could be a good, just like a there guy. He doesn't really have a number one position. You could throw him at safety, which he's not quick enough to be a safety, I think. Or you could throw him at corner. But Rasul Douglas is like a hybrid almost. Linebacker
Yeah,
spot to be
definitely.
exact.
So let me tell you my thoughts, and I'm reading some of the comments here. Definitely seems like there's a lot of people that agree with me on this. I think Sidney Jones is potentially the answer there. He was one of the top corners coming out of that draft when we got him. We don't really have a good history drafting players out of Washington, whether it be Markel Fultz or Sidney Jones. But Sidney Jones has been hurt. Some guys like Steph Curry, if you remember, Gavin, Steph Curry had chronic ankle injuries early in his career, and they didn't give up on him. He was almost traded to the Bucks, actually. They didn't give up on him, and he ended up becoming an MVP and a world champion. So not necessarily to compare him to Sidney Jones, but the bottom line is some players early in their careers do have some chronic injury problems that they can grow out of, or they learn how to take better care of their bodies. They learn exercises to keep themselves strong. And so I think that Sidney Jones is going to take that next step. And so you mentioned he really didn't do much when he was on the field. Early on last year, you're right, he was a healthy scratch a few times. But something changed in him towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
If you remember the Monday night game, he made a big breakup right before overtime, and which we ended up winning the coin toss going down the field and getting a touchdown to Zach Ertz, courtesy of guys like Greg Ward and Boston Scott helping us get down there. But going back to the cornerback situation with Sidney Jones, he also made a few big plays in Washington, I remember. And then finally, he made the biggest play of the season. Sidney Jones broke up on a 4th and 8 against Michael Gallup, step for step. They took out Amari Cooper. They looked at the field. They pointed out the one-on-one coverage to Sidney Jones, our weakest corner. And Sidney Jones made the biggest play of the season and saved us. And then at the end of the Giants game, the final one, a perfect ending to his story for this year. He had an interception against Daniel Jones as they were driving. The score wouldn't have mattered, but in my opinion, that was sentimental for him. So let me ask you again, do you think possibly there's a chance that Sidney Jones can redeem himself?
Well, yeah, I feel like he does. I'm a hard critic. All right, I when I see things repeatedly that I don't like, and I tend to count him out. Injuries and like Derrick Rose injuries were like a really really bad thing. Sometimes injuries just keep happening. You can't stop them. Do I believe in Sidney Jones? I do, but at the moment I don't. He still has a lot to prove in my eyes. But like at the end of the year, he stepped his game up. But it's not about the end of the year. Football isn't just week 15, 16, and 17. It's week 1 through 17 and maybe playoffs. So we got to keep the consistency. I'm not saying it has to be like a shutdown Richard Sherman type corner. If you could just stay consistent and not get burnt, because there was some times where Mark Cooper, I think, burned him on a couple of plays last year. So I think if he could just stay somewhat consistent throughout the whole year, he'll be all right in my book. But I still take Avonte Maddox over Sidney Jones right now.
And that's one thing, too, kind of just separating the differences. There are slot corners. There's the guys who play on the outside. Usually the outside's a little bigger to reflect on that of the outside receivers versus the slot. I expect to see Crayvon LeBlanc starting at the slot position this year with Avonte Maddox and Roby Coleman to come in at the backup position. I think it's LeBlanc's spot to lose, but I also think Avonte Maddox is going to step up and see him take some more snaps. I also expect to see a lot of hybrid work this year, a lot of minimal linebacker work, but having a few different safeties in there. Guys like Kavon Wallace are bigger, could be potentially a strong safety. Rodney McLeod's more of a free safety, a little bit speedier. And so I think that it's going to be an interesting defense this year, the front four. And so the front four has been a lot more improved as if it wasn't good already. But there's a lot more depth this year. Malik Jackson's expected to be back. Javon Hargraves, who was one of the most double-team players last year, put him and Fletcher Cox on the inside.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask you this right before we get on to our next topic. Who was your breakout star on the defense this season for the Eagles?
Oh, breakout star. See, I don't know because there's a whole bunch. Because one day one outshines and the next one does. I feel like everybody, in my opinion. I can't really pick just
Everybody has
one.
a chance to prove themselves.
Yeah. I feel like if you had to pick a full healthy Eagles defense, especially with the pass front, like I know Malik Jackson spent time a lot injured. I feel like and Derek Barnett. I think Derek Barnett costed some games, or not costed, but made a lot of stupid decisions. I couldn't pick him to be my breakout guy. So I would start to think breakout would have been Fletcher Cox. Even though Fletcher Cox, wasn't what we normally see him as because he was bad at injuries, and the same thing with Brandon Graham. But when those brothers are like fully healthy, they're dogs. They're going to get after you. And if they can get time to get there, then like we're gonna be a problem. The Eagles defense is always the front four has always been like a problem, and I think the person we really should look out for will most likely be Malik Jackson. He's going to show us why we brought him in this year.
For me, mine's a little bit of an underdog pick. Mine is Josh Sweat, number 94, the defensive end for the Eagles. He has a similar build to a lot of other longer defensive ends versus guys like Brandon Graham who've been playing there a lot. He's a little bit more of a bigger stacked guy, but Josh Sweat's shown that he can be a pure power rusher and use some of his moves. He'll be coming off the bench this year. I look forward to seeing Josh Sweat, number 94, everybody. So watch out for him. So without further ado, we're going to move on to our next topic. We're not going to be into too much detail, but we are going to just talk a little bit about the drama in Detroit. Detroit historically is not really known as a very good franchise at all. But Matt Patricia comes in there, and so the more we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about the Bill Belichick tree. And you think about guys like Brian Flores in Miami. But let's focus on Matt Patricia. There have been some rumors or speculations that him and Darius Slay did not get along, pushed him out. But also with Kerryon Johnson, apparently he yelled at him after he didn't remember the history of Ford Field. Are these some similar things that happen in New England that maybe aren't leaked out? Or is this something that Matt Patricia maybe has misinterpreted of Belichick's style? Or is this fully unique to how Matt Patricia works? And then finally, do you think Detroit can be successful under Matt Patricia?
Well, see, that's the thing. Because, one, for starters, I don't think that Matt Patricia followed how Bill Belichick runs his way of his culture. I think there was a little bit of power trip, especially between Darius Slay and Matt Patricia, because there's some things that Matt Patricia said to Darius Slay where you just like, hey, that's has nothing to do with football. Like Matt Patricia, I do believe they might be able to win, and I don't at the same time, because you look at Detroit, they don't have a whole bunch around them now. I think their best days is when Calvin Johnson was there and Matt Stafford was young. Now you look at it, they're just wasting Matt Stafford's talent. Kerryon Johnson, who I really like, the new corner, Jeff Okuda, I think that's how you say his name. And they also got Desmond Trufant. So their secondary I don't want to say got better, but it is new. It's a new look. And you look at Matt Patricia and you're like, all right, you had 2 losing seasons or one or two. I can't remember at the top of my head. I think it's pretty much just 2. I think I think pretty soon he's going to be on the clock. You're like, all right, why can't you win? You're supposed to be a defensive-minded person, but you went 4-12-1. Give or take, Matt Stafford got hurt last year. So we can let off the gas on that one. But you got to look at Matt Patricia and be like, dude, what are you doing? Literally, what are you doing?
I agree. Now, definitely there's some problems there. They drafted a new running back this year. I don't know if they're trying to push Kerryon Johnson out with some drama that happened in there. And so I think that it's going to be interesting to say the least. The NFC North is getting, in my opinion, is getting less competitive. I think Chicago's on their way down still. Detroit's still at the basement. And in my opinion, Minnesota's on their way down. And Green Bay, really, I mean, they were up and down last year in the one-possession games. If you look at their stats, it's really interesting. They were like 11-1 in one-possession games, that one being the Philadelphia Eagles. So that division, in my opinion, is more up for grabs than people think. We'll obviously progress on that as we continue to move along. The Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky, I know we're going to debate that later this week. So everybody stay tuned if you're interested in hearing more. I know Detroit's not the most exciting topic, but one of the things that we like to cover on here. So let's shift it back here to southeastern Pennsylvania and talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. Do the Eagles have enough weapons? And then I know we're going to talk about later if Howie made enough moves. We'll get to that. But let's start with number one. Do the Eagles have enough weapons? Have they done enough in this offseason for Carson Wentz and the Eagles?
You can start it if you want. You can start it.
All right, I'll kick it off. In my opinion, yes, and here's why. The Philadelphia Eagles in the first round had an opportunity to select a slot receiver who runs very good routes, similar build to Amari Cooper, in Justin Jefferson, who had a very great year last year with LSU, a historic year in reality. He had a a 4-touchdown game versus Oklahoma in the playoffs. So let's talk about who they decided to draft. They drafted Jalen Reagor, a experienced wide receiver. He's on the shorter side. I believe he's at 5'11" out of TCU. Very fast receiver, very good after the catch, very good with some trick plays. Last year's production was down, but also keep in mind that they did not have a very good quarterback. But in my opinion, he has some raw talent, and the Eagles can shape it. There's two things the Eagles said when they drafted Jalen Reagor. Number one, we have trust in our coaching staff to develop a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. We feel that he has enough raw talent to become a top-tier receiver in this league. Number two, they believe in their philosophy of using 2 tight ends at once. You want to have guys that can stretch the field because they're usually going to line up on the outside, running routes that are downfield, longer routes. That means that guys like Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert are here to stay. Their route running ability, their ability to cut through the middle of the field, take away linebackers, set pick plays, things like that. So expect to see a lot of 2 tight end, 2 wide receiver, and running back sets this year. Expect to hold on to those formations, even though we do have some more receivers this year, because we are primarily looking for speed. I believe they tried to model this year the same way the Kansas City Chiefs did with Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman, Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson. And they also went out and got Marquise Goodwin, who is injury prone. Hopefully he can stay healthy. But in my opinion, yes, the Eagles did enough. Depending on how the defense does this year and if the O-line can be consistent, however good Carson Wentz is however far this team can go. So
for me, I say yes. At first, I wasn't really sold on Jalen Reagor, and I looked up more highlights. And I'm like, this is what we need. We needed a deep threat, a speedster, and a really great return man. And you look at the receiving crew we had last year, a little bit on the older side, and then you had Nelson Aguilar dropping footballs. So you get a Marquise Goodwin, you get a Jalen Reagor, you get, Deshaun Jackson's coming back. And then obviously with Miles Sanders in the backfield, Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, like the weapons are there. It's just the man at how healthy can he stay at the helm and how healthy can the offensive line get. I know injuries were decimated last year, the decimated Eagles offense, and somehow, some way we pulled through. And I'm a firm believer if Carson Wentz doesn't get knocked out by Jadeveon Clowney, I think we may or may not win that game or become a little bit closer. I do, but I will say this though. If Carson Wentz can get the ball to these receivers with enough time and stay healthy, we could be looking at a better resemblance of what happened in 2017 than what we saw last year. And what we saw last year wasn't that bad. We saw guys like Greg Ward and Boston Scott, who I hope they stay up here for a while and help us out because they were really good late additions that kept us going. And I think Miles Sanders is going to improve. I think it comes down to if we could just stay healthy and if the defense can just keep us on the field too.
Definitely, and I agree. And so I do want to just trace back quickly to this comment that was mentioned too here. I want to go over as well as I continue with my point. Do you eventually think paying Goddard will be an issue? I do possibly. I think that George Kittle is going to really set the bar next year when his contract is up to pay. So as far as retaining weapons, things like that, Deshaun Jackson's obviously going to be gone by then. I don't think J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, if he does even break out, is going to be asking for money that's going to break the bank. I do think that this team is willing to invest heavily in their tight ends. It depends on if you're going to pay Ertz top 5 tight end money. If you can get away with paying Goddard top 15, top 10 tight end money, then I'd keep them. But if they're both asking for top 5, top 10, you're going to have to most likely stick with Ertz. I would be fine sticking with Goddard, but Goddard still has more to prove. He does have a drops issue, although he does in Pro Football Focus's rankings. He's the only tight end next to George Kittle in top 5 in run blocking and passing or catching the ball. So I do think that could potentially be an issue. We'll see how that is in the future. Also, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, apparently there were rumors that he was hurt a lot of last year. He does seem like he has a lot of raw talent. He went to Stanford. There are some good highlights of him there, similar to Alshon Jeffrey. Let's see if he can learn this year. Potentially he could. And I think that if you can get Arcega-Whiteside to really come up and be a good player, guys like Greg Ward and Jalen Reagor, then at that point you aren't going to need to have 2 top 5 tight ends. But right now you would want to consistently keep them. And as you mentioned, Boston Scott, Miles Sanders, 2 phenomenal pass-catching running backs. I hope to see them both here for a good time from now.
There's a comment that says Scott needs to be in a rotation more, and I agree. I think him and Miles Sanders could be a disgusting combination. Totally. And if you look at Boston Scott, you look at this short guy, and then all of a sudden he runs through you, and we need that more. We need both of that. That made the Super Bowl team really great because they had LeGarrette Blount, a guy that can just bulldoze through people. We had someone in the red zone, but we didn't have to pass. And I think that's where we missed a lot was a guy we can run over. We get in Jay Jai and we have another guy. So I think Boston Scott needs to be included really more, really like really, really more. And I hope Doug Peterson can do that with Miles Sanders. I think Miles Sanders is going to improve as well. We're going to see Miles Sanders go really up and not decrease.
I agree. All right, so let's get started with the next. Let's get started with the next topic here. We're going to talk about dark horse MVP picks, and so I think that this is a interesting one to say the least. So, Gavin, I'm going to let you go first, and I'm going to tell you who my dark horse MVP pick is. And this is the NFL we're still talking about.
Well, first, before I get into that, yes, Corey Clement is also coming back, so there might be a 3-back system.
Yep.
Yeah,
as long as he can stay healthy.
Yeah. See, MVP pick. See, it's hard because you could obviously go say Pat Mahomes. You could obviously say Lamar Jackson. You could easily say Tom Brady again. My MVP pick might be Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes is only going to get better, and when you think you have him figured out, you don't. He'll do something totally different. And I remember in the one playoff game where he ran like 20 yards for a touchdown and fell in, and everybody thought he was going to slide. But you could also make a case for Lamar Jackson. You can make a case for Lamar Jackson saying, well, hey, if he can throw the ball more, he can go back to back. You can make a case for Derrick Henry. Thank you, John. We can make a case for Derrick Henry where if he continues to bulldoze people like it was in the playoffs, he was definitely the playoff MVP for sure because Ryan Tannehill sure wasn't doing it. And it's hard. It's hard to pick. I feel like for me, I have to watch 4 weeks of the season to tell. But right now, I'm going to go with Pat Mahomes right now.
All right, great. I'm going to bring in a quick picture of who mine is. And again, mine's definitely a dark horse to say the least. My pick is Drew Lock. And here's why. Drew Lock is in a rebuilding Broncos. Last year, they seemed dead in the water when they had picked up Joe Flacco. But all of a sudden, Drew Lock, who was injured a lot of the year, comes in at the end of the year. They beat the Texans. They have a few competitive games. And let's talk about more on top of that, who they got this year. They got KJ Hamler, a speedy wideout out of Penn State in the second round. In the first round, they got Jerry Jeudy. He's surrounded by plenty of weapons. Not only does he have Philip Lindsay, but now he also has Melvin Gordon. He has plenty of talent around him to do what it takes in order to potentially win the MVP. There's something about second-year quarterbacks. Carson Wentz, who unfortunately fell short of it due to his injury, did not become the MVP, but he was on his way to being it. In his second year, you can take a look at a guy like Lamar Jackson, a guy like Patrick Mahomes in their first year as a starter, but a second year since being drafted. And in my opinion, the second-year quarterbacks in the order of dark horse MVP, I'm going to go with Drew Lock at number 1, Kyler Murray at number 2, and Daniel Jones at number 3. And Daniel Jones definitely could be a head-scratcher. But I could see the Giants potentially making some trouble this year. They do have a good enough wide receiver core. Daniel Jones, guys like Daniel Jones and Drew Lock aren't the most mobile, but they're smart. And they know how to trust their O-line now. Unfortunately, in New York, the O-line's not the greatest, so he did get some fumbles last year. But guys like this, if you can surround them with the right pieces, can be talented. My dark horse MVP pick is going to be Drew Lock.
Well, now that I think about it, one more thing then. But it's between like dark horse MVP. Like, yeah, you're right. It could be Drew Lock. I'm not a big fan of Drew Lock. Like you talk about all the like Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, like that's cool. But if you want to pick a second-year quarterback that might have a really increased odds again, it might be Kyler Murray. Like I said, you got Larry Fitzgerald, aging Larry Fitzgerald, but he's still effective. You got DeAndre Hopkins, you got Kristen Kirk, and those are just people to throw to. You got Kenyon Drake in the backfield. And I forgot the one guy that ran for 3 touchdowns against the New York Giants. I forgot his name, but you got him also in the backfield too. So it's between Kyler Murray for me and Patrick Mahomes for me.
Got to know. I can see that considering that he's mobile. I really wanted to extend the dark horse element of it. That's why I did choose Drew Lock. So I can see him being there. I mean, the obvious Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. Curious if Carson Wentz can return to his MVP form. But other than that, I mean, that's pretty much wraps up some of our NFL talk. Yeah, go ahead.
I wish Carson Wentz could go back for the MVP year, and I still think he deserves one. I think that's the only thing that's missing from his weapon, not his repertoire, his trophy case. Is just MVP trophy. I don't think Tom Brady deserved it that year.
All right, well, no, we'll take a look. I mean, definitely missing those last few games is unfortunate. He does have a ring. Obviously, he did not win it directly, but definitely a big part of it. We can hope to see that in the future. So we're going to go on to the NBA now.
Yes, Chase Edmonds. That's the guy I was talking about.
So we got 3 more topics here today, a few that are going to take some time. I know we have 20 minutes left here on the show, so we're going to get to our next part talking about the NBA. So Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are officially ruled out for the rest of the season. They announced the other day that 22 teams would be going to Orlando starting July 31st to compete for the playoffs. Currently, the Brooklyn Nets are the 7th seed behind our Philadelphia Sixers. I don't know how the Sixers are the 6th seed, but as we digress, let's get back to the Brooklyn Nets. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving nearly instantly make the Nets a potential favorite in the East next season. They already were good before this year when they had D'Angelo Russell there, a guy like Harris LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jared Allen, and a few other guys. They allowed D'Angelo Russell to walk, and they brought in these two superstars. Here's my question to you, Gavin. This year did not go the way they wanted. Kyrie Irving had a few massive games, but did not come up big when it mattered. He was hurt, but there weren't many expectations for the Nets this year, knowing that a top 5 NBA player in Kevin Durant was hurt, and even if he can return to his top 5 abilities after his Achilles injury. So the question is, what would it look like, not from the season starting, but what would it look like for the 8 games and the playoffs if Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving played? Now, I remind you, most likely they would hold on to the 7th seed, and they would play the Toronto Raptors in the first round.
Well, first of all, I don't see them coming out the first round. And you got to remember, they still got some good guys that was part of the group last year. I do believe in Spencer Dinwiddie, Harris LeVert, Jared Allen, and everybody else and the rest of the crew. But you got to remember this. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, like, it sounds great together, but they're totally two ball-dominant players. When it comes down to the last shot, Kevin Durant can hit it. Kyrie Irving can hit it. Kyrie Irving, I don't know if this is true or not, but Kyrie Irving can kill a locker room. Kevin Durant is moody. Kevin Durant can get upset quickly and not want to play no more. So it's interesting to see how those guys can coexist and work together. Could it be like another problem like it was in Oklahoma City with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook? Or could it be something fantastic like an Anthony Davis and LeBron James type? We don't know. We have to wait till next year. Now, regarding this year, I don't see the Brooklyn Nets losing the 7th spot. I do not see them walking out of the first round against Toronto. But but the guys I have there, and like I said, Harris LeVert and all those guys, they're not scrubs. They were part of a D'Angelo Russell team last year with Jared Dudley and all those other guys. They didn't really lose many. They just lost D'Angelo Russell, which I thought personally D'Angelo Russell was a perfect fit there. He was the guy there. He was the man there. They felt otherwise, and you already know how that went. And for those guys to come in next year, we don't know. They might not everybody said they're going to increase title odds. That's true. That is true. But production for the other players, Spencer Dinwiddie was taking less shots when Kyrie Irving was out. When Kyrie Irving was in, excuse me. Then you got to consider Kevin Durant wants his shots. So it goes back to, can they share the ball like the Warriors did back in last year? So we don't know how this is going to go. I'm pretty excited to watch because it's going to be a new, I don't want to say super team, but a new duo in the Eastern Conference.
I think it'll be interesting. And so you mentioned the ball dominance of Kevin Durant, but he was also surrounded by the best shooter in NBA history, arguably. So I think that he would not have a problem playing with a ball dominant point guard. In my opinion, it comes down to the locker room. Can they coexist in the locker room? Apparently, there were Nets players this year that were frustrated with the treatment of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in the locker room. I guess they felt like they were being treated like more elite than them. But I also want to trace back to a comment here in the section. I don't know why they let D'Angelo Russell go. If I were them, I would have kept D'Angelo Russell. If I knew I can get Kevin Durant without Kyrie Irving, I would. Or maybe continue to build around D'Angelo Russell because he proved last year that they were a great fit. We know what happened. We know what happened in LA with the Lakers with D'Angelo Russell. He goes over to Brooklyn. It seemed like it was going to be his team. I was shocked when the Warriors signed him, and now he's in Minnesota. So he's been bouncing around a lot. I think it's unfortunate for him in such a young career. But we'll see how it plays out specifically here with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving coming back next season.
They're not going to be a sleeper team, but we talked about yesterday how Giannis just dominates and destroys everybody. That's not going to be a team you can just run through. Especially fully healthy, the Brooklyn Nets next year, they're going to be a problem. I don't know how far they're going to go in the East, but they're going to be a problem.
I agree. All right, so that wraps up that. We have 2 more conversations today. We think it might get a little feisty in here, as I know Gavin and myself definitely disagree on a few of these elements, to say the least. So we're going to get started with our second to last topic today and our first debate. In the second round with the 53rd overall pick, the Philadelphia Eagles made a shocking selection when they decided to choose Jalen Hurts out of Oklahoma. Jalen Hurts, the quarterback. That's correct. But the Eagles already have a quarterback in Carson Wentz. They drafted him with the second overall pick in 2016. 2016, off to a hot start. Following the Lane Johnson injury, the team started to fall off and ended the season 7-9. The following year, Carson Wentz would go out there with actual weapons in a running game, as well as a very good O-line and defensive front four, and would go out to be the front runner in the MVP race. With a touchdown run in a competitive game against the Rams, which ended up being called back because of a holding call, Carson Wentz would tear his ACL, still threw a touchdown pass, which was his 33rd, breaking the record of Donovan McNabb, and would go on to miss the rest of the season. Backup Nick Foles would come in, and we all know the rest.
Yeah, rest is history.
The following season, Carson Wentz would come in after the Buccaneers game, which in my opinion was still too soon. And after reading up on some things and actually hearing Carson Wentz had spoke to Andrew McCutcheon about not rushing yourself back, it became very obvious early that Carson Wentz was back too soon.
Yeah.
They had a few games where they were up, such as the Panthers and the Titans, and they let those fade away. Some of them because of Carson Wentz's poor decision-making. But all in all, his stats were actually pretty much up there with his statistics from the year before. And the Dallas Cowboys game, the one in Dallas where they lost because of a deflection into Amari Cooper's hands, Carson Wentz's season would be shut down again. And once again, Nick Foles comes in and guides them to the playoffs. Now, let's talk about this past season. Injuries were already an issue for Carson Wentz and the entire team, funny enough. A lot of pressure was on Carson every time he took a hit. Every Eagles fan would close their eyes whenever Carson wouldn't dive, or even if he ran the ball. Fumbling problems became an issue this year for him.
Again.
And even more than that, he even was able to carry this team.
Yeah.
After a Miami Dolphins disgusting loss, which I put on the defense in reality, as well as a Zach Ertz drop and a Jake Elliott miss, Carson Wentz and the Eagles turned it up after halftime against the Giants. They would go on to win 4 straight games. Not only did they win 4 straight games, but Carson Wentz played in 16 games and was on his way to his first ever playoff start. After missing out on the previous 2, which you could argue at least the first one, he was a huge part of sending that team to the Super Bowl.
Of course.
In his second drive of the Seattle Seahawks game, irregardless if there should have been a flag thrown on the play, Carson Wentz was knocked out with a concussion.
Mm-hmm.
After playing his first 16-game season since his rookie season, Carson Wentz had a similar feel.
Mm-hmm.
The blue tent went up. He walked off to the locker room, and his backup quarterback came in. After 16 games and proving himself and throwing this team on his back and making it obvious that he needs more weapons, Carson Wentz proved that he's worth the money. And he's done things that a lot of other quarterbacks have never done. That is carrying an entirely depleted team to the playoffs, including beating one of the best teams on paper in the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
And having no problem beating the New York Giants in Week 17.
Mm-hmm.
In the first round, Eagles fans were already not excited with the pick Howie Roseman made. Now that we've done more research, Jalen Reagor will most likely be a fine pick.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't matter how Justin Jefferson's career goes.
Yeah.
In the second round, there were still good wide receivers on the board, or even Zach Baun, the linebacker from Wisconsin, which we knew we needed a linebacker. Here's what the funny part is, too, before we even get to the fact that Jalen Hurts was drafted. They could have traded their first and second round pick to the Atlanta Falcons for their first round pick, jumping the Cowboys and getting a CeeDee Lamb. Howie Roseman and Doug Peterson felt that they needed Jalen Hurts more than they needed a better weapon for Carson Wentz. We don't know exactly what the plans are with him. He could be used like Taysom Hill. But as mentioned in the comments, a second-round quarterback on a guy like Jalen Hurts who had already been asked to play wide receiver or running back doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But here's even more than that. Not only do we discuss this part, let's talk about the fact that there's a possibility that this team is done with Carson Wentz. Might sound crazy. They gave him a fat extension. They make it beyond obvious. They bend over backwards to make sure they state that they are in love with Carson Wentz and quote-unquote married to him. But then why would you spend a second-round pick on another quarterback? You can admit it's because you're worried about his injuries, and it's pretty hard to argue that he's been hurt.
Right, so.
Would he be called injury-prone? Technically not, because that usually means there's a chronic injury such as ankles or other issues like that, like Sidney Jones has had with his hamstring and a few other guys. Carson Wentz had different types of injuries, maybe because of his playing style or maybe because he's rolled a few bad dice early on in his career, like a lot of other players do before they bounce back and have a fine career. Could they be worried that Carson Wentz could retire early like Andrew Luck, and they want to have an adequate replacement here for the next few years? We don't know. The person sitting to my right believes there's a possibility that Jalen Hurts could start this season. I'm now going to let him go as I gave a very lengthy intro to let us know his thoughts, and then we're going to discuss it.
Oh,
Gavin,
man.
off to
First
you.
of all, I want to put this out here before people kill me in the comment section, like they've been killing me all show. I'm not against Carson Wentz here. I want to win. Zach, you want to win. Eagles fans around here, they want to win. The pick of Jalen Hurts was not to overtake Carson Wentz. This is one of those things where it's like, hey, if Carson bounces right now, this is insurance. We're ready to go. Do I believe there's a possibility Jalen Hurts could start? Small chance. Maybe like a 10% chance. But when they drafted Jalen Hurts, I was upset. I was furious. I'm like, this is not what we needed. I had a talk with my dad downstairs, a nice little debate about it. And he opened his eyes. He said, what if this is just an insurance pick? What if this is something we don't know? What if the concussion was more? Because people, when you get concussion, sometimes they don't come back 100%. And in my eyes, Carson Wentz has never been the same since 2017, the ACL injury. He hasn't run the ball that much anymore like he used to. He used to be able to mobility outside the pocket, hit great throws. Accurate wasn't that much. So I look at Carson Wentz now, and I'm like, well, this pick makes sense. Carson Wentz played a full year last year, and I'm not going to knock the man. He had nobody around him, really. Everybody was hurt. And if you look at Carson Wentz and you go, well, wait a minute. The playoffs, we were left with, Josh McCown. So Howie Roseman's idea of this pick was, let's get a backup just in case the Carson Wentz goes down. We got a backup where we can throw in, and the backup is with more speed. The backup is ready to go. The backup is Jalen Hurts. He's not no scrub. He came from Alabama, and Tua replaced him, and he went to Oklahoma and had success there too. He didn't win the national championship, but he still had success. So everybody needs to not calm down, because I'm not telling you to calm down. We all love Wentz. We're always going to love Wentz. But the narrative around Wentz was, can he stay healthy? And that always has been a narrative around Carson Wentz. Can he stay healthy? And we don't know. Sorry, I had to read something. But the thing is, for me, is when you look at Carson Wentz and you look at Jalen Hurts, and this pick doesn't sound too far off. Maybe we can do something like, the Taysom Hill package where Taysom Hill comes in and he runs the ball. Or we can get creative, because I think our creativity died when we lost Frank Wright. The Philly special and all that stuff. We haven't been creative ever since that. Have we? We haven't. So maybe we can get creative with Jalen Hurts. You never know. If Carson Wentz is doing horrible, Jalen Hurts can come in. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts deserves to be starter day one, because there's some things that he has to work on. His throwing is still not proved that well. He was throwing to CeeDee Lamb, and arguably, I don't know when he left for Oklahoma. I don't know if Jerry Jeudy was there in Alabama along with him and Henry Ruggs. I think they were there because they just came out all together. So you're like, okay, everybody just relax. We look at it and we're like, well, maybe we can unlock full potential. Maybe we get more speed. Maybe we can line Carson Wentz. Maybe we can line Jalen Hurts in the wide receiver spot and do like this wide receiver screen, or will we throw across the field? I have no idea. We have to watch. But am I a firm believer that Jalen Hurts will be a starter one day? I believe so. I believe he will. Am I doubting the talent of Carson Wentz? No, because Carson Wentz still brought us the Super Bowl. I don't care anyone says. Yes, Nick Foles is a man hoisting the trophy at the end of the day. But without Carson Wentz, there wouldn't be no trophy. Do you think Nick Foles could really win? What was it, like 12 games, 12, 13 games?
11, went 11-1.
11-1. And then I remember
11-2.
11-2. I remember on Christmas, we got destroyed by the Oakland Raiders on Christmas with Nick Foles. So
we won that game. But it was not pretty. It was pretty. Jay Ajayi and defensive effort.
And also, I want to say, I want to read this comment. Bama also feels NFL caliber offensive line every year. That's true. That is totally true. So I'm gonna ask you this question: would you be okay if Jalen Hurts was a starter? what would it take for you? Because we're both big Wentz guys, but what would it take for you to be like, all right, we got to sit Wentz down. We got to run with Jalen Hurts to see how it goes, like what they did in Baltimore for Lamar Jackson.
Well, first of all, in Baltimore, Joe Flacco was a aging quarterback who they were ready to push out. Carson Wentz is a young quarterback in his prime, being paid top dollar. If he's throwing a 50% completion percentage and his touchdown to interception ratio is 1-10, then yeah, I can bench him.
Yeah.
Other than that, you have to think about the other factors. Again, they should have won the Atlanta game. They should have won the Detroit game because of factors that weren't Carson Wentz's fault. Or more, I guess, a better way to word it is it wasn't only Carson Wentz that they lost some of those games. For example, there are games where Carson Wentz has lost it for the Eagles. Think of the Tennessee Titans game and the Carolina Panthers game from 2 years ago. So, in all honesty, I mean, and it says in the comments, outperform Wentz. That's what it takes. And I'm like you mentioned, I care about this team winning. It doesn't matter who's quarterback. But Carson Wentz has proved himself again and again. And right now, very solidified, has proved himself. And it's his opportunity to go out there and show it's his team. That's why this is a perfect opportunity for Carson this year to not only not prove that he's the team's quarterback because he's already done that, but this year take it to the next level. We're talking about 11-5 up to 13-3. It's a tough schedule this year. But the Dallas Cowboys have it no easier. They have the same coach. My question to you, though, Gavin, at what point do you turn to the coach? Because remember, I know it's easy to think about the sweet ending, but after the Miami Dolphins game, I was ready to fire Doug Peterson. And, I mean, his inability to commit to the run, in my opinion, is very unfortunate. And so you think about the Dallas Cowboys game where the Eagles lost with Carson Wentz in his last game in 2018. They ran the ball 9. The following week against the Rams, they ran at 25+. They have one loss over the past 3 years when they run the ball more than 25 times, irregardless of who their quarterback is. So at what point do you look at the coach?
Well, you're not wrong. And I think me and you, we've been preaching this too. And I was about to get to that point. You got to look at Doug Peterson. You got to look at Doug Peterson and be like, well, wait a minute. When Nick Foles is in, why are we running the ball way more when Nick Foles is in and when Carson Wentz is in, we're letting him air it out? Like, it should be balanced. It should be. And now that we have a running back, for sure, bona fide stud running back that can, I wouldn't say he's going to get to the point where he's going to start terrorizing defenses. Yeah. Now, on the Miami, now you brought the Miami game. Okay. I wouldn't fire Doug Peterson off that Miami game, even though it was horrible. I would look at the defense of coordinator. You know, me and my dad, we've been screaming for Jim Schwartz to be gone. You know, get out of here. But the thing is like it wasn't the offense that really lost us the game. You let a horrible Miami offense run down repeatedly and score touchdowns. They even on the fake. That was horrible. I wanted to break my TV. The fake, you know the fake I'm talking about where they scored the yeah. Like Jim Schwartz. We can't okay. Offensively, we can blame Doug Peterson for something, which is not running the ball, right? But when it comes to
there you go, Gavin, you're back in.
We get
technical difficulty.
When we look at running the ball, that's all Doug Peterson's fault. He didn't run the ball, right? But
think about it. The Miami Dolphins had the worst rush defense last year. They ran the ball 18 or 19 times. If you know your defense is struggling, let them get a breather. Run the ball, get a few first downs on the ground, tire out the defense. So I think in the comments as well, putting up 30 points, I mean, that's pretty much the blame on the defense. But you can help them out by slowing it down and giving them time to breathe. And that's one of the X factors.
But here's the thing, too. If you got a defense that was high, I think they were way overconfident when they went in that game. I think they really underestimated Miami. That's the scariest thing when you're playing against a team that has nothing to lose, nothing to play for. And I know we're running short on time, so I'm gonna make this quick. A lot of these losses, some were on Wentz, but if you want to get coaching, some was on Doug Peterson, but a lot of them were on Jim Schwartz too. I think before we fired Doug Peterson, hey, wait a minute, we gotta get rid of Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz is the guy that be calling the plays. And when you get a team like the Miami Dolphins 30 points, it takes 30 points to beat the Dolphins. That's all
right.
you only need.
It shouldn't take that much to beat the Dolphins. You're right.
And you gave up 30 points, and you gave up a horrible thing, and you made the Miami offense, as horrible as it is, look like an elite offense marching down the field. Couldn't buy a stop. couldn't buy a stop if they would buy one get one free. Like you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. Like if you like it was horrible. Like there's this comment right here. I'm not gonna say the full thing, but downplayed the stuff out of Miami. That's right. Kalen, you're right. They did. They really did. And the corners too, they were blaming Devontae Parker. He was having whatever he wanted.
On both Darby and Jalen Mills.
Exactly. That was horrible. That was disgusting.
I agree. So hopefully some of those problems are going to be fixed, considering that with Darius Slay and a few other guys.
Go ahead. Let me ask you this quick question, and then we're going to head out of here. Schwartz. So as one comment says, Schwartz is fine. We need corners to fit the scheme that we lack. So we got corners now, right? If what is the same thing as last year, when will we start pointing the finger at Schwartz?
If Darius Slay struggles this year, I'm going to point to Jim Schwartz. But and Kalen just mentioned this, our philosophy as a team is not to have lockdown corners that give quarterbacks all day. It's to use our front four and occasionally blitz to get pressure to the quarterback. And once you get a quarterback off of their ability and get off of their rhythm, it's game over for them.
Yeah.
All right, great. So that is going to wrap up our show for today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We're just over an hour now. If you are interested in supporting our podcast and our talk show, in the description on YouTube, you can take a look at our Patreon. You can donate every month, or you can share it with friends if they can donate. Again, 10% of the money that we get, we are going to donate to a foundation of the viewers' choosing. We also have a Teespring. If you want a sweatshirt, a phone case, a tote bag, or whatever with the awesome logo that you see in the top right corner of your screen, definitely take a look at it. We're going to be doing a Q&A on Friday, so stay tuned for that. We have a few special guests coming on in the coming weeks. We will announce that formally this week. If you're not following us on Twitter, it is the More Than Philly Sports Talk Show. You can look up MTPSTS, and you can take a look there, and you can follow us on there. We're going to have the links posted there on my Instagram, on Gavin's Instagram, as well as a few other places as well. So without further ado, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at 12 o'clock. And we're going to be having a big discussion tomorrow. Who is the GOAT? And we're referring to the NBA in that category. So that's a lot to go over tomorrow as well. And we're going to have a lot of fun with